My name is Rochelle Streeter. I grew up in Indianapolis. My mother had 5 kids. She was a single parent. Unfortunately, my mother, she was a schizophrenic at the time, so I didn't really have a happy childhood growing up, but I did the best I could. So when I graduated from high school back in 1989, I decided to move out. And when I moved out, I moved in with an older woman who was around 29 at the time, and I thought that was a good decision. I ended up meeting a guy, and when I met that guy, I thought he was the best thing that could have ever happened to me. So I was working a shift swing job where I would work first shift some days, second shift, and then third shift. It all depends. Whenever they called me, I would go into work. And so I ended up having a birth control pill, which I thought I was taking correctly, but I ended up not taking it correctly. And I'm still thinking that I'm protected, to not get pregnant, but I ended up getting pregnant by this guy. And when I found out I was pregnant, he wasn't happy at all about that. He thought I was trying to trap him, which I wasn't. I was shocked that I had gotten pregnant because I thought that the birth control pill was working, and it wasn't working. Shared it with him, the lady that I was living with. I shared it with her. Very nervous. I didn't really share it with anybody because since I moved in with her, my family didn't know. My siblings didn't know. My mother didn't know. So I really didn't have a lot of friends. And one of my high school friends, I shared with her that I was pregnant. So it wasn't a lot of people that knew I was pregnant at the time. So I ended up telling the guy, that I was pregnant and wanted to keep the baby, but he didn't want the baby. He felt that I was trying to trap him, and so he told me that he hated me. He wanted nothing to do with me. And when he said those words to me, I didn't know what to do. And I was devastated, Didn't know which way to go at that time. And I did share with the lady I was living with, and she told me, she's like, oh, well, and the lady that I was living with was Christian. And she told me, she says, oh, well, you can go ahead and get an abortion and I'll pay for it. What? Thinking about it. And so I went to Planned Parenthood and told them what I was thinking. And to me, they were more than happy to help me to abort the baby. They didn't talk to me at all about keeping the baby. They talked to me about how to get rid of the baby. And so I decided that, okay, I'll go ahead and have the abortion. So when they told me I had to wait till I was at least 6 weeks pregnant. So I think I ended up being 7 or 8 weeks when it happened because I had to schedule my time. And I remember the day when it was time for the abortion. I walked into that clinic. There were a lot of people out in front of the clinic telling me, don't do that, don't do it. And so my friend, she was with me, and a couple of people, I guess nurses, I didn't even remember who it was, but they literally did come out and sweep you into the place so you don't listen. But there was a guy that stood in front of me. I never forget. He said, you don't have to do this. And so I ended up having the abortion. And when I had my abortion, I felt like life was ripped out of me, even though it wasn't a traumatic experience as far as the baby being removed. It's just that I knew that a part of me was gone, and I felt that. And when I went back home, I didn't know what to think, what to do. And so a few days had went by, and I just thought about what I had did, and I did feel bad. I really did. I never talked to anybody about it, but the person I stayed with, she's like, well, you're okay now. And then when the guy found out a couple of weeks later that I got the abortion, he was happy. And it's like life went back to the norm. But deep down, I knew that what I did was wrong. And so as I fast forward in life, I met my husband that I'm married to now. Our first year of marriage, I got pregnant, and I thought I was, having a regular pregnancy, and I was so excited about it. So our anniversary, we went to Chicago to visit family and friends. And when we came back from Chicago, I was really, really sick. And so my husband took me to the doctor's office, and he ended up taking me to the hospital. And I found out I was 8 weeks pregnant in my left fallopian tube. And so the doctor told me I was going to have emergency surgery. And I was blown away by that. So I ended up having emergency surgery, and when I was having the emergency surgery, the doctor told my husband, he says, we can't save the baby because it's in the wrong spot, but we're going to try to save your wife. And my husband was, devastated, dealing with a lot of emotions, and he said, whatever you do, just try to save my wife. And so they ended up having to take my left fallopian tube. And so when that happened, when I found out what happened, I was blown away that had happened to me. And then as time went on, I was under that doctor's care. He basically told me that I might not be able to get pregnant, but try in vitro. And when my husband and I decided to do in vitro, he said, honey, I can't do this. I can't do this in vitro. He says, God has not said no, so I don't want to do the in vitro. And I'm like, okay. So we ended up not doing the in vitro. And I had that experience as far as, God, why is this happening to me? Why did I have to have a tubal pregnancy? And you know what? I said I had that abortion. And so I had put in my mind that God was punishing me. Because not only did I have the pregnancy, but I end up having the guy that got me pregnant, he ended up giving me a disease that ended up eating away my reproductive system. Now, I did not know this, and the doctor was not able to realize this because it was eating up the insides of my fallopian tubes, and we didn't know that. So it was hard for me to get pregnant after the tubal pregnancy. It was very hard to get pregnant. And like my husband said, he didn't want to do the in vitro. So that was in about 1994, 95. My husband and I, we went back and forth, did all we could to get pregnant. And I was just so angry with God, so angry with the world, angry with everybody that I saw that was pregnant, because at that time I realized I wanted to have a baby. So as time went on, I say 2001, I decided to finally pick myself up. And when I say pick myself up, I decided to live, because I was working a job, and I'm like, okay, you need to get a career. You need to make money because you can't stay in this rut. And I stopped being angry with everyone that was around me and started deciding that I wanted to live. Even though I wanted to still have a baby, I decided, if one of these days, maybe God is going to give me a baby, I just kept hoping in the back of my mind. And I would talk to people about it. And my husband and I, we had so many people praying for us. We had a whole city praying for us to have a baby. We had so many people coming to us asking us why we couldn't have a baby, and just so much about a baby, almost every day of my life. And I heard so many people, oh, it's going to happen. And I was just on a roller coaster for years, going up and down, back and forth. So one day I was in nursing school and we had this role play in school. And they said, well, Rochelle, why don't you act like you're a teen mom and you're going to go get an abortion? Well, that that hit home for me because I had really did it. None of my classmates, they didn't know what I had went through in the past. But at the time, I was like, okay, I'll do it. And so I ended up doing it. And then when I left school that day, I said, I said, God, if it's meant for me to get pregnant after all these years, you will do it. After I had that tubal pregnancy, I ended up having 14 surgeries. The 14 surgeries I had was I had to have a DNC because I had a pregnancy, but it didn't thrive. And I ended up seeing a baby inside of my womb, but the baby had disintegrated because the placenta fell out of me. And when I got to the hospital, it was too late, and I could just see a baby disintegrating. And I never forgot that. And the 14 surgeries I had to have was a lot of what's called laparoscopies. So not only did the doctor have to remove that tubal pregnancy, he ended up having to move over the 14 surgeries. My part of my uterus was removed. All of my fallopian tube on the left side had to be completely removed, and then even an ovary. I had to lose an ovary. So the only thing I had functioning was a right ovary, whole right fallopian tube, and part of my uterus. So when that happened, and I prayed that prayer that day coming home from school in 2002. In the fall of 2002, I prayed that prayer on the way home from school that day because it reminded me of what I had done. I said to myself, I said, God, it's in your hands. And I would go, my husband and I, we went to church, of course, when we were married, but I didn't really have that relationship with God like I needed. But when I prayed that prayer that day, I felt like I was drawing closer to God. So that next month, November of 2022, after I prayed that prayer on the way home from school, I got pregnant. And so I didn't realize it, and I was at work, and I called my husband. I said, honey, I said, haven't had a period. He's like, really? It's like, yeah. He said, call the doctor, call the doctor. So I called our doctor, and she said, don't even come to me. She says, I want you to go to the OBGYN right away. So I went to the OBGYN, and they did a pregnancy test, and it was positive. And we were both excited but very nervous because we didn't know what to expect. And so we were like, God, is this really it? And I'm like saying it had to be it because of all the prayers and everything. So to make a long story short, I was not only pregnant, but I found out I was like 8 weeks pregnant, and the doctor was so excited, and he told me, he said, I want you on bed rest. So they put me on bed rest. I was taken such good care of during this pregnancy, and it was like God letting me know this is it, but you have to do everything that you need to do to keep this baby. And so I was on bed rest for I think maybe the first couple of months, and then I was healthy and able to go back to work. I went back to work. And then when I went back to work, I want to say I was 7 months pregnant, and by that time, we had shared it with our family and everything. And so I was excited. And then after sharing that experience with everybody and being on bed rest, God put me on bed rest the last 3 months of the pregnancy because he wanted to make sure that we kept the baby. So God had mercy upon me. I drew so much closer to God at that time. And I'm like, God, even though I'm did something wrong. I sinned against you years ago. You finally heard my cry and had mercy upon me. And I ended up dedicating my son back to God. I prayed the prayer of Hannah over him. And I said, God, if you give me a child, which you did, I said, I'll give him back to you. And so I gave my son to God that day. And I haven't looked back. And my son, he's 20 years old today. And I'm just so proud of him. And I just thank God for him. And back, I want to say, 2012, I was listening to a wonderful, amazing woman of God, and how I met her online. It was nobody but God. He literally led me to this woman. And she was talking about abortions. I thought that part of my life was over with, because of what I had to go through, what I did. At that moment in time, about April of 2012, here we are talking about abortion again. And so what she told the women that were listening, she said, some of you in your past, you've had abortions. And she said, even though you've had those abortions, she said, you killed someone. She said, you killed a child. And she said that was a life that God could have used. And when she said that, it not only hit home, but I was like, oh my gosh, she's so right. I didn't think about that. The time I had my abortion, I did not think about that. I didn't have anybody to say, I'll help you or I'll be there for you. It's like those that were around me, which was only few, talked me into doing something that was wrong. So I'll never forget that day. She said, you need to ask God to forgive you for taking that life. You need to repent. You need to ask God to forgive you. And I did that day. I asked God to forgive me. I told him I was so sorry, because I did not realize what I had done. And she walked us that day through, asking God to forgive us. For I knew it wasn't just me that was listening that day. And so I did. I asked God to forgive me. And it was a godly sorrow. I knew that not only did I want to be forgiven, but I was even more grateful that day for having my son, because I knew that God had mercy upon me, and that he had blessed my husband and I with a wonderful son. And after I asked him to forgive me, I had to kind of pause the video because I was crying. So I wept and I wept and I cried. And when I got finished crying, I went back to the video. She says, and now that you've asked God to forgive you, you need to name that baby. And she said, it doesn't matter what you name the baby. You need to name that baby. And she said, when you name that baby, God will let that child know that you've given him or her a name. And then when you get to heaven, that child will be so happy that you named him, and you'll see him. So I was able to name the child, and not only that, I was getting healed at the same time. I was getting so healed at that time in my life, and I didn't even realize it. And so I ended up sharing that. But when I found her online, I shared that with so many women, and then they were able to get healed as well. And I'm so grateful because I haven't stopped sharing the goodness of God and how he forgave me, and that abortion is wrong, and that is a life, and that we should not be so quick to destroy a life. And that those that have had an abortion, they need to ask God to forgive. And I'm so healed today that I'm able to sit here and talk about this, and I'm so grateful. And I hope that I'm able to help, others, because after I had my son, my husband and I, we tried again to have more kids. And the doctor, he said, you shouldn't try to have more kids. He says, because you have one ovary and one fallopian tube. He said, and your body has gone through a lot of trauma. And he basically told us that having the one child was really a miracle. And it was such a miracle. And people are so blown away when I tell them that I was able to get pregnant by having just one ovary and one fallopian tube. It was nobody but God. And I'm so grateful even today how he has had mercy upon me. And so grateful for a humble son, healthy, and he's doing good in life. And that makes me feel so good. And I thank God that I just have an opportunity to just share what I went through and how God has blessed me and how he has healed me. Because when I look around at life today, they make it seem like having an abortion is easy, but when you get the love of God in your heart and you realize that that is not right, you will eventually ask God to forgive you. Because God is God and he's so good, and that's just how God works. He's such a loving God. And when you draw closer to God, he will draw closer to you. And you don't have a choice but to give him your heart. And when you do that, all the wrong that you've done in the past, you will eventually ask God to forgive you. And so God did come into my heart more so than ever that day when I was able to sit and hear the words of asking God to forgive me of the wrong that I did those years ago as a teenager. And I thank God that he has healed me. And I am so grateful today and so glad that I'm able to share with others. The awesome thing about losing a child is one of the greatest things we can ever look forward to when we've asked God to forgive us, is knowing that they are safe, they are in heaven, they are with God. And my oldest sister, who was like a mother to my siblings and I in so many ways, she passed away during COVID. And when she passed away, I finally was able to share with my siblings that when I was a teenager, I had an abortion. And I didn't want to share it with them, but I told them, I said, I'm going to go ahead and let you know, because I was hoping to see my kids before her, but before anyone. But she made it there before us, and she got to see them before me. And so me sharing that with my family, that was part of my healing as well. And they were so grateful that I shared that with them. My family, they said they had no idea what I went through when I moved away from home. They said, we are so sorry, but thank you for sharing that. And that was part of my healing process as well. But I'm so overjoyed to know that my kids are in heaven with my sister, and I just hope that she's giving them lots of hugs and kisses for me. And I can't wait till that reunion comes when we're all together, and I'll get to see him again. So when you've asked God to forgive you, even though you've done wrong, just remember you've got something to look forward to, and that's seeing that child again and raising them again when you get to heaven.